said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy... Flyover State of Fear. Welcome back to Flyover State of Fear. It looks a little different in here. I have a very special guest in Dan Nye. We've known him as an actor, a podcaster, and I've only known you as a tweeter. And how are you doing, Dan? And before I ask Dan that, I have my co-host from Flyover State of Film, Brian, joining me now is just the co-host of Fear. So hi Brian, hi Dan. What's going on, Dan?
I mean, not a whole lot. It's interesting getting back into, because I took a healthy break from not podcasting or not doing the only ones that I was associating. So it's nice to get back into that kind of groove, because it's something I do enjoy and something the pandemic really, forced us all to go like this, as opposed to when Brian and I lived in the same town and we never saw each other then. Now we live on opposite sides of the country and we still don't see each other. So in the same regards, not much has changed, but also everything has changed. So,
gotcha. Well,
that's right. Dan's a fellow Buckeye.
I am.
He knew what to do, which is get the fuck out of here.
I was like, 34 years in this state is it's too long. I gotta go.
I don't know. There's some internet joke on here with like one guy from Jersey, two guys from Ohio. There's some meme here waiting to happen.
It's hey, we're the butt of many a joke, but
especially
now,
gotta
buckle down.
It just popped out of nowhere.
It just keeps getting worse.
It's
literally.
It's to the point, because like that Gen Z humor doesn't make sense sometimes. So it'd be like, people who buy white bread at the grocery store must be from Ohio. It's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means.
But sure, I'll take it. I'll take the
right
on the chin.
I'm up for a good insult. You know what I mean? I come from the '90s. That's burn culture. Like, I'm into it. But do hit me with something. Don't this nonsense. And then I amused myself. Well, that doesn't do nothing for me.
Anyway, Dan, what have you been, though? I know you said you kind of taken a break from podcasting. Wasn't sure if you were still up to your community podcast. Are you what are you up to in general with your acting and
yeah, all of the above. That was part of the reason was during the pandemic, the wife and I had a great idea. We wound up getting married and then 10 days later moved across the country. I don't know if I would...
Same. Congrats.
I don't know if I would put two massive life events so close to each other.
That's a lot of stress. That's a lot of stress for you to deal with.
There was a couple of months where I was a little bit out of my mind. And
I got married twice in the pandemic. I get it.
Yeah. No, that was actually initially our plan, and then we shrunk it all down. So as far as podcasting go, Ramble On is still floating around. The community one is active. There's actually been more with that. So I co-host a community podcast called Apartment 303, and then also very recently I was made an admin on one of the biggest community fan accounts on Twitter.
That's awesome.
So I also co-run Communities, which is...
They got a new movie coming out, right?
Yeah, and that was part of it, where there's a lot more happening behind the scenes that we don't, fully know. And, a little bit I can't talk about, and a little bit we don't fully know yet. But yes, the movie, I believe, is filming over the summer, I think June or July.
Oh.
But yeah, so that's going to be really exciting. There's going to be a lot more stuff as far as community fandom to come out with everything going on around that. So being here and being where it's going to be filmed is actually pretty damn exciting. And so that's one thing I'm getting really excited for. And then other stuff, I still work at a restaurant to pay the bills, because that's what you do being a cliche and an actor out in LA.
You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I'm still submitting for stuff. I'm still finding jobs on my own, making connections, having an agency. It's a weird and exciting thing at the same time, because I was a working actor in Ohio, and everyone just kind of it's a strange. When we moved, everything was still closed down from the pandemic, so there wasn't really a culture shock. But and I'm sure Brian could attest to this, knowing at least how the community is in Ohio. Anytime I would tell somebody I was an actor in Ohio, they would either laugh at me or they'd make a bad joke and be like, "Ho ho, what, in porn?" And that just, it's weird because
sometimes,
I mean, pays the bills. But
hey, we got a low budget horror movie you referred me to that I still haven't checked out.
Oh, well, then I guess we can't talk about it. But
we can talk about it.
We can talk. I can just share experiences. But that's the thing, is you do it out here and like nobody bats an eye. It's a very strange thing where it's like, oh, okay,
of course, they're just like, of course, you're an actor.
Yeah, it's a normal thing.
What else would you be doing here?
And that's so strange.
You just come to LA because you love to wait tables in the place with the worst traffic on the planet. Like, that's
the weather. But although that's even not great now too. Like the last literal month and a half, it's been like Ohio. Like I've had to remind myself on multiple occasions, people are losing their minds out here, and I'm like, oh right, like people are not used to this amount of precipitation. Where it's like I grew up with this, like. It was literally in Ohio. If it was cloudy, the heavens could open at any second. Whereas here, I literally talked to a buddy of mine and he's like, no joke, this is the most weather we've had in 20 years. Like, and it's just been about a month and a half of like storming biblically on and off. So it's very strange, but like, it's in general, like, great. We love it out here. So
great. I'm happy for you. You mentioned the community thing. I remember years ago, I struck a nerve with you because I think it's like, who gives a fuck? It was something very aggressive about Community, and I've seen the show. I'm a fan, and I know we're both big fans of Psych as well. But
get a verbal fish shake from me.
And you were like, no, not. It was like that. And maybe your soccer fandom I crossed the line with, and I was like, note it. It's just.
There are things you can touch nerves with me, sure.
Sure, everyone. Although I do remember I was making fun of something one time, and some guys go, that's like if I started making fun of the Jets or the Mets, I go, and it's a day that ends in Y.
The Mets and the Jets are a joke. That's
it was one of those. Someone who shouted, Brian would know who it is. I don't know if Dan would, so I'll just leave it at that. It was very funny. Anyway, so for anyone that knows, Dan did pick It Part 1 to speak of, and we'll talk about it a little later in the episode. So on my show, I like to ask, what is your horror origin story? And that could be answered really any way you really want to. Like, even if you don't like horror movies, what is that about? Or, what is your answer there?
Well, and it's kind of funny because just in general, I'm not a big horror fan. And it's amusing because like I mentioned, and I picked It because I also get somewhat selfishly, I was able to be in a killer clown horror movie that was shot in Kentucky and Indiana. And it's ironically intrinsically tied in with the release of this movie because it got bumped when I think you guys were up and running at the same time while we were in the midst of Ramble On, and this movie kept getting pushed. Like it kept getting pushed and it kept getting pushed. So like it wasn't, the one I worked on wasn't quite an Asylum release, which is the studio that everyone kind of knows for making the no, I think I was watching part of it before we started. I think it's Viva is the
I watched so many movies as like with the group of like that level where we notice. I know the productions that are production companies, and one of the main ones is I believe Wild Eye Releasing, and it's just like every bad shark movie.
Yeah.
So that level is
I knew going in when I signed on, they're like, they gave us X amount of money. This is going directly to Redbox, and it's supposed to be released literally at the same time as it. Yeah. But then it kept getting pushed. So this got released like end of the movie I was in called The Legend of Wasco got released like end of 2015 around Christmas, just because there must have been like some contract that they had to release it. And then it didn't come out till 2017. So it was like almost, it was like a year and a half later. It was so much later. But like me personally, it was just, I think I hadn't had like the exposure. Like a lot of times you get kids seeing horror movies, they're like, it intrinsically stays with them and then they develop fears from them. And I didn't really have that. So I kind of grew up without it. And then as I got older into my 20s, I was like, I wound up and this is one of them, I wound up appreciating them a lot more than being like scared. Like I vividly remember.
That's what happens.
I remember being in theaters and it was The Strangers. I remember seeing that like opening weekend and being like, I'm not even necessarily like, but this is different. Like it's slower, it's methodical.
It's like suspense and tension are what gets you when you grow up. Like when you're younger, you like, you watch the horror stuff, you like the jump scares, but as you get older, like the real fear always comes from that like tension.
So it's interesting, and especially with it too, because we'll definitely dive into that later. It was so different in the way they're executed, and I respect them a lot more because they run the gamut. The one I was in was like a shoestring budget, and like
Sure.
I had a ball, and like there was
they all look fun.
a very specific line that hooked me into it.
Independent,
And
low budge loves horror because
Mhm.
it's not doesn't take a lot to make things scary.
It's
One room and a little bit of fake blood, you can make a scary movie.
yeah. It's interesting too because like there is a shift too when you say about the strangers, and then you are getting more of these releases that are methodically tension pacing, and I mean they exist in the 80s, 90s, but they're far and few between, right? Like I'd recommend like Misery to you if you're from the early 90s. It's that not full blown horror, but yeah, you have the strangers, and then a few years later you have like something like The Conjuring, and then
Well, also, I think what you're talking about too, then with The Conjuring and with this too, is like almost like a blockbuster horror, like a bigger budget horror. You know what I mean? Like you really got into a horror that like cashed in on the like we know teens are going to see this, so let's make it feel like a big franchise movie. And I feel like that's the way they feel.
It's not just the paranormal activities.
I mean, the first It.
Well, it and save it. That is a smash hit. I think it holds some like number one record. I think
it was like number one R-rated for a while, maybe, or number one R-rated horror for a while.
I think it's right there, and then like it went.
But it made a lot of money for sure.
Yes, I think it got beat out by the Joker to be honest.
Yeah, that might have been. It might have reigned until Joker came out.
But so that's a good pick there. But it's interesting to hear, like, and that's why I like asking that question too. Is you're like, yeah, I found it later in life, and part of that is it's actually similar to. I spoke to an actress, Alyssa Kaminsky, who starred in Velocipaster, which is another one of those.
Nice.
I mean, that has a very cult following, but that's same thing as Legend of Wasco. Like, they had no idea, and I had her on the show. I went to high school with her, and she gave a similar answer. Well, I don't like horror movies. I wasn't into them, and now I have a respect for them. I saw how the sausage was made.
Yeah, and that's like, I go in between. So like selfishly, I picked it so I could talk a little bit about my career. If I'm going to pick one that like I really like I almost did Cabin in the Woods because it's such a blend of horror and sci-fi. Like that one's like right in my wheelhouse. Like if I had to pick a horror movie that like I really like, or something like Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah,
like
you just named a triple feature in October where
like
that's the Final Girls in there, and you got yourself a stew.
You got a stew going, baby.
Yeah.
A lot of meat left on that bone. But yeah, that's the same kind of thing. So like I like it when they blend, and then because like straight up horror, straight up slasher, I'm like, okay, or like even Scream. Like Scream being very meta about it, which is something we were able to do in Wasco, which I really enjoyed. And then even a little bit in, I don't want to say it gets a little bit meta, but you do have some characters that are making those conscious comments about like what you have to be doing as a character, which I like. A lot of times you get into slashers and it's like the characters are just saying goofy things to move the plot along, and you're like, no person would actually behave or act like this.
A really nice thing of kind of what you're saying of modern horror movies too, and I really always appreciate it. It's not even meta, is when characters acknowledge things are odd and they're like mention pop culture.
Yeah.
Because that's how we
obviously
about
that
right?
started with Scream, and that's a fine line to walk because you don't want your horror movie to be a Marvel movie where everybody's like, "Oh, that just happened," Like
Battle in New York, am I right?
We've seen that balance, that pendulum swing a little too far at times, and like I would even say it is close, like it walks the line. But I think it's well written enough, and I really think it rides on the back of Finn Wolfhard so much. Like, if he didn't land so many jokes, he's funnier than Bill Hader is in the sequel, which is bananas.
They gave Bill Hader, they tried to, they gave him a heavy dramatics to not.
I like what they did. I'm not here to litigate Chapter 2 because I'm like a defender.
Me and you have fought over it. I'm not a fan.
We're not doing it. We're not going to do that tonight. We're talking about the first one, but I just mean in general.
Funny enough, I'll be right in between you guys, just because I enjoy the first one, and then I saw 2, and I'm like, I can see what they were trying to do, but also like a little bit of latter game of Game of Thrones series where it's like there's clearly not enough material for you to base this off of, and then they're trying to stretch it into a full story.
The minute 2 got out, and I'll go right into the synopsis after this. The minute 2 got me out of the movies was when Mike gives everyone a job like it's the beginning of a video game, and they got to go find like their totems and I was like, I'm done.
Oh, but I like their little side quests, their side missions. We're not doing this.
It was fine. Brian made me. You actually made me at some point. You said give it a rewatch. I gave it a rewatch, and I became more in the middle on it part 2 than.
I'll tell you this: it's a lot. It's too much, really. But if
it's almost an hour longer, isn't it?
As far as I'm concerned, the meat, there's enough meat on the bone to use our previous metaphor.
So, meat and bone. But Dan, thank you for sharing your horror origin story on that. And no, it's always interesting to learn because, like, you never know where you're going to find it. But I think at some point, everyone fucking finds it, even if it's not what they think is horror, which is kind of the beauty about this genre. Because if you pick Tucker and Dale and you're like, nah, I just like to laugh, and there's some creepy parts.
Well, and it's also like, I'll be more self-serving because I got to audition for that director for a movie he did for Netflix called Little Evil, which was the same director.
Little Evil.
Yeah, I saw Little Evil.
So I got to audition for that, and it was the part
Rob Corddry.
Adam Scott.
Adam Scott.
Oh, I'm thinking of it. There was another pregnancy. That was Hell Baby.
Hell Baby. You're thinking of Hell Baby.
Yeah.
So, this one, there are very few auditions that I've done that stick in my head that I liked it or I should have done it. And I had the sides for a few days. This is when I was back in Ohio because it actually filmed, it filmed in Amish country, I think not far outside Akron.
Okay.
But not far from where I grew up. But they wanted me to play. It's a small part, and I didn't I looked up who was directing it because I didn't know what the movie was, what they were looking for, and they're like, "Oh, it's a horror movie. Netflix is doing it." Blah blah blah. They wound up casting somebody who didn't look anything like me, but it was more of a name. They were on an ABC show or something. And as soon as I looked it up, it took me 2 or 3 times reading through the sides. Yeah, 2 or 3 times reading through the sides, and then I'm like, "Wait a minute." I looked up who the director was, and I'm like, oh, this is a horror comedy. And it changed how I was going to read it. Sure. And so I literally did it as big and as over the top. And I was chewing on, because I was supposed to be a fallen angel that half of my face was scarred.
Next time I watch the movie, I'm going to, pop it on.
Yeah, only in one scene. And I actually was very confident about that. And then I didn't get it. And then I watched the movie and I'm like, that guy doesn't look anything like me. So there's another longer story about casting and I'm ever so slightly bitter about that because I had a lot of fun doing it and it was very over the top and I really enjoyed it. But at the end of the day, I didn't get it. So
yeah,
well.
I guess you just gotta roll with it because that must be rough to think about. It I'm so much better than that.
Well, that's the longer story about casting, and that's the thing. I didn't say better because it's that clearly
not better. I could have nailed it in a different way.
That's the thing is that it's just the short version of that story. I wasn't what they were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I have to. That's how my headcanon goes, and that's why I can just roll with it because it's oh well. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I'll find somebody who does want what I have to offer. Yeah, I'm
a similar fear and rejection as graphic design and artistry and all that. It's. Any artist gets rejection. You got to learn to deal with it. So I love that. And that's the thing. Perspective.
As far as actors go, people say that they're like, "How do you deal with such rejection?" I'm like, it's not rejection. It's just silence. If you don't get anything, you never hear. It's just radio silence.
Nobody calls you up to tell you no. They just give it to someone else, and you don't hear anything.
It's like being fired. No one's set in a meeting on their calendar for 3 weeks from now to fire you. They're just going to do it.
Just happens.
And if you do hear back from people, typically it's we can't use you now, but we really appreciate what you did. And that's rare. And it's happened a handful of times, but that's always different and always super appreciated.
Oh, great. Love to hear that. So as discussed, we're doing it part 1. And like I said, I have pulled the synopsis from what we Google and it just doesn't, they never land it, but we'll see if this one does. 7 young outcasts in Derry, Maine, are about to face their worst nightmare, an ancient shape-shifting evil that emerges from the sewer every 27 years to prey on the town's children. Banding together over the course of one horrifying summer, The friends must overcome their own personal fears to battle the murderous, bloodthirsty clown known as Pennywise. That was actually a
I was gonna say, I think
perfect.
Google nailed that one, but
They nailed it.
also more iconic story to pull. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you have
Well,
the previous movie, you have the book. Like there's a lot of like good
this
plot synopsis of it floating around, probably for Google to pull from.
stemmed from Scream that I did with Janine, because
Yeah.
that description is just like famous movie, famous 90s movie that features a slash. It was very like, huh?
Yeah.
Like
Movies
just
direct.
generic, yeah.
The movie's directed by Andy Muschietti.
What had he
And
done? He did. Was it the Evil
Mom.
Dead?
He did
Oh,
Mama.
Mama. It was Mama before this.
With also
Evil Dead's Fede Alvarez. I'm sorry.
yeah, and Mama's a solid. Mama's
I
a
like
movie-
Mama a lot, actually. I really
Mama's
do.
Mama was a movie that is a victim of its advertising, because it's not this like supernatural, like grunge, like ghost is gonna kill you horror movie that it wants you to be. It's just a really like sad tale about like
It's kind of like a family,
mothers
almost
and
like a family
children.
drama. It's got scares and it's scary and
It's
stuff.
creepy. And
Also, wasn't it one that
supernatural.
was sold off the back of like Guillermo del Toro presents?
Guillermo del Toro's
so
Mama.
that also gives people weird expectations. I remember that used to like happen with the Quentin Tarantino, like Quentin Tarantino presents Iron Monkey or something. And people would have weird expectations going into that. They're like, no, he just wanted you to see it. He didn't really have anything to do with it.
It's like Jordan Peele's Candyman.
He's a producer, but like, and that can mean.
But a producer
so
in the
many
sense
things.
that literally he just like got it in front of your eyes. You know what I mean?
My
like,
favorite version of that, of like someone who doesn't care at all, is like the Steven Spielberg produced like Transformers. We were talking Transformers earlier. Like he produces all those movies. And it's like, I don't care.
He cared about the first one. I remember he was out in force for the first one. He paid his dues on the red carpet. From there on out, I mean, that was like, what was that, 15 years ago?
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's like Christopher Nolan in the
it.
DCEU. That first Man of Steel, he was like, yeah, me and my wife are involved because of the Dark Knight. And then he was like, get the fuck out of here.
I think it was Jonathan. I don't even think it was Christopher Nolan.
I think he's on the...
Maybe producing credit,
but it was just to help like ease the Dark Knight-ness. So hey, getting ahead of myself here. This movie though does have a really interesting path to getting made. I always found it went through a few directors, most notably Cary Fukunaga of
I remember that
it's like right before he did True Detective.
Was that they signed before, or was it after True Detective?
No, it was before
signed him.
It was before True Detective, and he was. I mean, he had casted Will Poulter, and it was like my audition blew me away. Right. And I remember being that
Will Poulter would have been good
because it was this like that was before we've seen the Will Poulter. This was like We're the Millers Will Poulter, where like if you didn't have that foresight,
it doesn't matter. If those eyebrows, like he's got them. Like he's got evil eyebrows.
And so, and Cary Fukunaga is credited as a like the two guys. He did the screenplay with someone else, and they're both credited on this. But I'm pretty sure it's this is Muschietti's movie, and I believe the only actor they kept is Finn Wolfhard. So it's interesting that Finn Wolfhard stayed on way 6 years or something like that. And this movie, this thing was huge. I mean, it was riding also that success of Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we could get through any
the 80s kids. You guys, I mean, it's 80s kids on bikes.
80 kids on bikes.
They nailed it. Oh man, can I talk about one of my biggest pet peeves in this movie is how the kids just constantly leave their bikes laying in the road. Mm-hmm. They just get off their bikes and leave them. They abandon them all the time. It always drives me crazy. Every time I watch it, I'm like, I'll run over your bikes. I'll do it out of spite.
They're not even in a yard.
No, just in the gutter at least. Just throw them off to the
throw
side.
them down. Derry? It's Derry. Derry is so dreary.
I was going to say it looks dreary, yeah.
Oh, my main note of the thing is every adult, once he turns the age of 24, everyone's just such a fucking piece of shit and mean and evil and grimy looking.
They address that in the second one though, don't they? That
there's a cloud over
the idea that Pennywise
the negativity around the town
kind of, and But I do think they could do a little bit better of a job selling that, like, when the people drive by while the kids get about to get murdered on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
shake
there's a
their
balloon.
head.
That's okay.
There's a
Yeah.
balloon. The balloon blocked my view. I couldn't see the poor child getting stabbed.
Yeah, right.
That's the top 3 harshest things in this movie. Just the fucking knife to the flesh.
Oh,
Yeah.
So we do start this intro, and I was watching with my headphones on, so I actually heard it. Like, you even hear, like, kids laughing on that intro with the logo, which I normally wouldn't know, but it was this eerie effect, and this rain is really heavy, and it's Georgie and Ben? No, not Ben. Bill. I'm gonna fuck all these kids' names up.
I have it up in the other monitor. It's the only reason I'm able to remember them.
And Bill, and they're just setting up like he's gonna make him this paper plane. He's gonna say, "Okay, go out there, but don't be too long." Just real, brother stuff. I don't know why anyone want to play in that heavy a rain, but it's 5-year-olds.
Well, and like the whole thing is that Bill kind of like is blowing him off a little bit. It's like, here, take this thing, go play. Leave me alone.
Be an older brother.
Brother stuff. Yeah, exactly.
And he's randomly sick. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's randomly sick. And yeah, so he just straight up goes out there, and his boat gets like lost, and he down the drain, and he goes to the drain, and what a great introduction of Pennywise. I know I failed to note that this is a remake of the classic Tim Curry
90s
miniseries, which is only good because of Tim Curry.
Outside of his performance alone, it's pretty forgettable.
And of a certain age, I know that miniseries does like hold like people like tight. I know I've had guests on this show like reference that as their origin too. So
I believe
it had its
because
time
it was a horror thing that got beamed into your house. You know what I mean? Like, it was on TV. Your mom and dad didn't have to take you to theater, which they wouldn't do. You could even if you never saw the movie, you could see the previews for the, you know what I mean? It would be on your TV all the time, like this week, and see creepy ass Tim Curry and shit.
But also you have like, for that, it's like network TV scary. So you're getting 20% of what this movie is able to accomplish? Maybe.
This movie does so much.
It's a hard R for this movie for sure.
But so they have that, and then we need Pennywise with the popcorn.
Skarsgård is so good. Like you were saying, I'm sure Poulter would have been good too, but God, Bill Skarsgård.
Skarsgård, the fact that when you find out that he's able to do those eyes just naturally.
that's not an effect that he's doing it on set. Yeah,
there's also, since we just brought him up, there's one, I remember either reading a thing or like hearing a story on some podcast somewhere about Bill Skarsgård in the taping of this first movie, where he was saying he was nervous and they kept him separated from the young kids, so that way when they saw him at first, like the reaction would be much more genuine, they'd be much more afraid. And he said one of the kids, I want to say it was the actor who played Eddie, Jack Dylan Grazer. Just because I have it next to me.
Yeah, please, thank you.
I want to say it was him, but I'm not entirely sure. Where he said that this is coming from Skarsgård. And he was like, they did the take, everything's great, the kids are nice and scared, and like it was all good. But then apparently Bill Brake's character afterwards, he's like, no, hey, I'm just an actor, it's all okay. But apparently the kid was like the most Hollywood, like, nope. Love it. Love the energy, man. Let's do it.
I read that too. He just
that kid, because he plays Eddie. He's one of my we already talked about Finn Wolfhard, but actually we should shout out all the kids. But I love his performance too. And then the guy that got to play the older version, it was uncanny. It's the best casting in the whole thing.
And he like married his mother, and he's like, there's the nervousness perfectly. Yeah,
the kids are real good.
Yeah, all the kids. I mean, just an amazing cast of kids. Sophia Willis. I always try to shout it out. The Oz Perkins, Gretel and Hansel movie. If you get a chance to give that a shot, everybody should check that out. I know there's been kind of a dearth of witch movies lately, but it was really good, really atmospheric, really kind of cool. And Oz Perkins, if anybody watched The Black Coat's Daughter, that's another.
Oh, it's her. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's Oz Perkins. He directed that, and he directed the new Gretel and Hansel, and it's really good. And she starred in that, and she's in the new Dungeons and Dragons movie getting ready to come out. And then, we talked about, obviously, Finn Wolfhard's, and the other kid, and then the other kids. Again, you've got their names there, but all of them.
Yes.
I like
One kid, the kid who plays Ben, was in the Goosebumps sequel.
Well, I was saying, I like the kid who plays Ben. He actually got typecast as that. He was in the Goosebumps sequel, just because of Goosebumps, and then he was in Are You Afraid of the Dark? Has his now miniseries like every October, and he's in the first one, actually directed by Andy Palmer, who did Funhouse Massacre, did the first miniseries. And I'm sorry, Ben Grabinski, not Andy Palmer. That very different. But people I follow on Twitter, just conveniently enough, Ben Grabinski, he did that, and but the kid plays the same thing. They literally have the same intro. Like, he has headphones on and he's walking into like high school, and and that anyway.
It's Jeremy Ray Taylor plays Ben.
The cast just fucking kills it, and but Georgie, it starts just so impactful. Like, you want a fruit, and he eats. It gets him in the store. And
he fully tears little Georgie's arm clean off in a very gruesome scene.
It's bleeding out, and I love the overshot,
the overhead of the arm coming out.
And
I think that was a poster.
And the blood trail going down to the drain. I mean, it's shot amazing. Like, Andy Muschietti directs the hell out of this thing.
And then we go right to June 1989, thick of summer, or right. I think school's supposed to be getting out, really.
Yeah. Well, it's supposed to have been not a full year. Georgie's been gone.
Yeah, there's still
7-8 months, something like that.
8 or 9 months. Yeah,
8 or 9 months,
something like that.
End of the school year. Yeah,
this is kind of when we meet our family, our kids. We start off with Mike, who has this scare of he's living with his uncle, and he has this scare of seeing these burned hands coming out of a door, and we do learn later that is his parents, and he's given just scare, and we meet Bev, and Bev is just bullied and spoken in the background. She has a reputation of being a slut, and which we already know as the audience is not true, but she just rolls with it.
And obviously, Bev's home life is suspect. There's, questionable things.
Well, that's the real horror. That's the real horror of this movie,
right?
And how awful all the parents are.
All the adults that we see, like Bev's dad, what's his name? Eddie's mom.
Henry's dad.
Well, Henry's dad. Like, everybody, it's in all of them.
When you first meet Bev's
the pharmacist,
Bev's mom,
the pharmacist, so gross.
Henry, when you first meet
Eddie's mom,
I'm like, well, she's just at first, it's like, okay, she's just like overly protective and like happens to be like overweight, like nothing.
She's the only one that you can be even watch, because I watched it today. She's the only one who you can be like, okay,
but then later
you
on,
at least have good intentions.
Yeah,
there's a little Munchausen by proxy kind of bubbling beneath the surface on that one.
And it's like
best
later
line of the movie is when he throws the gazebos.
They're gazebos.
They're gazebos.
I know what they are. They're gazebos.
It's so good.
But we do get to meet everything. There's this great running gag. Like, so Bev and Ben meet, and Ben is a new kid, literally listening to New Kids on the Block. She's very sweet, signs his yearbook. And, but then we go back to Bill, and we see, this is when we meet his dad, just being a jerk, not even being like, the pharmacist bad, just being a jerk to his son.
Yeah.
Real, it's time to get over your missing brother energy.
Yeah,
it hasn't.
You just get over that one real easily.
It hasn't even been a full calendar year. He's fucking dead, man.
Right.
Like, whoa, Jesus.
This guy didn't even wait as long as Skeet Ulrich did to try to bang Nev Campbell. That's like how fast he was ready to forget his son.
That's a metric of time. You should find a shorter way.
one. We call it one Skeet.
You know how expensive it is to kill the speed kids. 2 skeet hours.
He hadn't even had it. He was like 3/4 of a skeet. He didn't even wait.
But we do get this reveal that he's like built the sewer tunnel system, because like Derry has this big fucking sewer system that everyone's familiar with, and he's building it because he's like, no, my brother's still out there, and it's I don't know, pretty innocent. He's still only like 13.
Yeah, he's 11. I think it's supposed to be like a little younger even.
Yeah, we meet Stan, who I do feel like Stan is like the forgotten loser to me. Like, you know, we have a thing with his bar mitzvah.
I was gonna say he seems like the one with the least amount to do, but with arguably the scariest fucking imagery.
I was gonna say the forgotten Mike is kind of the forgotten kid because they take away the thing that they even give him to do in the book, which is in the book he's kind of the town historian, and they give that to Ben as like the new kid who researched the town because he was moving there, which makes sense plot wise for Ben to be like why he did it, but it takes a thing away from Mike. And I feel like there's a 40-minute chunk we get Mike's intro with the scary hands, and then we don't see him again until like the shit at the river, and that's like a good chunk of the movie. He's just gone.
Yeah, it's so
he's not at the quarry with them. There's like a lot that goes on that cements them as a group that he's not there for.
There's two really forgotten losers then.
Yeah,
when you put it that way, and but we do get like Dan.
And you can kind of understand why they underplay Stan and why they don't spend a ton of time on him when you know what goes on in the second movie.
That's what I was going to ask if it was Stan who takes his own life because I couldn't remember.
You feel like well. Okay. It's not gonna matter as much because we're not gonna get the payoff of like the older character as much, so like they don't maybe put as much into him. I don't know. I mean, that's just speculation. Who knows where the cuts were made? Because this is a damn near 2.5-hour movie, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot. That's kind of why I'm also kind of like running tooth that we talk about whatnot, so we don't just get big down at point.
No, we don't need to get bogged down in every plot point. But Dan,
what were you going to say there?
I was just going to say, like, as far as that, like, you're talking about 7 kids and then Pennywise as far as that, but like, it's a very well balanced ensemble.
I mean, it moves.
Yeah. Outside of those two kind of not having as much to do with some of the other characters, and like we talked about a little bit earlier, like Finn, the reason like Finn Wolfhard has as big a role as he does is because he's constantly cracking jokes. If you don't give him that, then, and outside of the argument they have on the street where it's like, we're all going to fucking die, I'm out. Like, he doesn't have that much to do either.
Shit,
so he's like,
you're right.
He's more of just a comic relief, but he's got a lot of really memorable lines that hit really hard. I don't want to take anything away from the other. We were talking about how good the ensemble and all the kids are, and that goes for the kids who are underplayed too. They're great in the roles they have. It just, and again, you're talking about, like you said, trying to balance 7 roles is an impossible task anyway. You know what I mean? You got to introduce all the characters, and you're trying to give them screen time and trying to build them up enough to care about them. It's a lot to ask.
It very much does feel, especially the way this was executed, because you bring up Stranger Things, which is kind of like all of that nostalgia just coming back through.
Heavily compared, you know.
Same thing, except where this is like, it feels much more like you're boiling it all down and you're literally reducing it to the purest form. Where Stranger Things, you're pulling out.
I want to see this as a movie. I don't. I don't want to interest. I know there's like prequel or whatever. Like
I think there's still it still may be in the boiler.
Or Pennywise.
A Dairy Maine show or something like that.
I want to see these as movies, like compared to like, you know, I don't need everything like detail put in. I'm making it up or filling in the blanks here. But yeah, so you like Dan said though, we do get the scariest moments. We're getting this thing from Stan's story to me too. He's studying for his bar mitzvah, and there's this creepy painting of this woman, and he just keeps visualizing zombie version of her. I think my one knock on this movie is the overuse of CGI for some of the monsters.
Sure.
It doesn't take anything away from it. It's just like, I think that would be creepier as an actual like practical effect.
Well, and it's interesting because you have that one being kind of overly CGI'd for Stan, but then you have the one for Eddie, which is the leper, and that one is so well done, and it's literally good chasing him around the house, like, and it's creepy as hell.
I like Ben's first introduction too, or like first introduction with Pennywise. In the library.
The library ones were really good. When he starts flipping through the pictures and they see the kid's head up in the tree, that's a really
headless corpse. And then
comes after him.
The headless corpse, picking up the eggs and dropping them, and he's falling. And the way it walks, the way it kind of moves, is real.
And it moves
creepy. Like
this maybe because I just talked about it. Also, like this movie, especially this time watching, I was like, this is a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I mean, it is basically this version of Freddy where you're like, could only do things if you believe, like you are afraid and fear, and then tricking the kids into things they're not seeing. Like the fact that the kids later on is really drumming ahead here is like cleaning up the blood that no one else can see in the bathroom except for Bev still sees this blood.
Okay.
Like,
Also, there's no way they would be able to get all that blood out. I mean,
no,
it's so covered. There's no way those kids, as the father of a 12-year-old, let me tell you that their ability to clean something thoroughly is suspect.
Hard air quotes on thoroughly.
Right. So like, I'm not. They're lucky that the parents couldn't see what was probably left behind, which was a lot of little in the cracks blood and shit.
Mm-hmm. Having said all that, though, during this whole time, one character we forgot to mention is there is this disgustingly racist gang of bullies in town, led by one main
racist, but because it's 2017 and we're a more sensitive society, very careful not to drop any hard ends.
Oh, wait, let me bring that up, because
no hard ends, but some hard R's.
Well, sure.
I told you guys before. Last night I recorded another fear for Final Destination 4.
Yeah,
there is this kid grown up.
Yeah, the guy with the tow truck, right?
Yeah, it is just a hard R out of nowhere, and it talked about it last night. It is. I'm
jarring.
glad it's not in this movie because it's jarring. It's not like I'm not prepped for it as if I'm watching like Django Unchained or something where I'm like transported back into a period. Anyway, it's just funny.
I don't need it. I'm not one of those guys who's like I just know
there's three white guys talking about this.
In the 80s, if a bully was that racist, I'm telling you, he's dropping them.
The guys
we all know it.
Using hard R's, F's, N's.
Yeah. F slurs.
I was going to say,
though,
to be fair, though, as far as, and this was Henry Bowers, played by Nicholas Hamilton,
mm-hmm.
to his credit, you don't need it, because he's such a good, like, as far as, like, antagonists go, he's almost just as menacing as Pennywise is, where it's like...
He embodies that Stephen King bully that is like an archetype in and of itself. Kiefer Sutherland from Stand By Me. Totally unpredictable, wild, clearly damaged person who is like, bad news.
Straight up like the ratty bully kid in Over the Top.
Okay.
That he arm wrestles in the like diner. Like the kids look just alike, and it's that same like just grime. Anyway, that's a very meek sentence.
We get it. You hate pores, Joe. God, right, you made it clear.
I didn't know it came off that way. But his shit's going on in this whole thing, and and that is the catalyst how all these kids meet. I mean, they go to find Ben, right? And please correct me if I really skipped anything major. And they go to find Ben to carve his name into his stomach, which is so fucking gruesome. And
it's really grim.
And Ben fights back and gets away, but they follow him out to the stores while the kids are down in the stores to help Bill out find his brother. They're like,
they're searching for Georgie, and they run into Ben, and he's all like, "I got to get some sewer water into my open wounds."
Oh.
That's the most I ever hear your accent, Joe, is when you try to say sewer.
Oh, I don't even know
because it comes. You put it into one syllable, so it's like sore.
Sore, yeah, sore. The sore,
not the sewer.
No, it's a sore.
We're from Ohio. We have the distinct lack of an accent. We just hard enunciate.
Well,
everything.
you would say that, but then we're gonna go wash our clothes and drink a gallon of milk. Because those are two of the big ones.
Wow. Okay, now I'm going to be self-conscious of every word I say. No.
Also, I was a big Ninja Turtles fan growing up, so sewer was like ingrained in my brain for very early.
Oh, it's so funny. First time I even knew I had an accent, I went to school in Pennsylvania, and they were like, "You don't have it until you have a couple beers," and I just talk really fast, and
there it comes.
Sounds like you're from New Jersey.
I have family from New Jersey, so I definitely can hear it. But yeah, those
fun. This is where I'm going to let it out. I'm Australian.
Oh shit! It's been 5 years.
You didn't know I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been hiding this accent the whole time.
We knew it. We always knew it. But yeah, no, it's
so
like
handsome.
It's true.
Mama Hemsworth.
The accent and the beard, the combination.
That's
just
right. I'm from the Outback.
But and that's the thing is like I was thinking about this as well. Did the archetype is like how much different is a Stephen King bully and how much like they're literally psychopathic and to
Yeah, a
the
Stephen King
nth
bully
degree.
actually like made me like overly afraid of what might happen to me in high school. You know what I mean? Like Stephen
Yeah.
King bullies like legitimately fucked me up a little bit where I was like, is there
They could
going to be
kill
somebody
you.
who
Yeah.
acts like that?
Oh,
you're gonna get stabbed.
It's not even the carving in the flesh, and then later on they're gonna beat him with Mike with a rock.
Yeah.
Well, then there's a rock war, which is a
that's
fun
right
scene.
before the
God,
rock
love
war.
the
That's
rock
in the
war.
same
So
scene.
good. The most
Mhm.
brutal, maybe the most brutal scene in the movie because so many kids get pelted in the head with
But
rocks.
during this tunnel scene, the first one, there's another bully going around with a homemade flamethrower.
Yeah.
Which, once again, just going to murder him. He's going to cauterize his cut and then burn his face off. He gets eaten by...
he gets snapped up by Pennywise.
Pennywise. But
and
you're
that
right.
leads to the scene a little bit later where you see that like they just hang up the missing kid posters over the previous one.
Mhm.
Like they're so quick to forget about the missing kids in this area. Like the way I guess it's not. There are more things kind of just built into the movie. They don't explicitly tell you, but there are things built into the movie to let you know that shit's not right. You know,
It does it does a really good job of. I know it's cliche to say, making Derry a character. You know, make like I mean, it's as cliche as it could be to New York City as a character, but like something like the town fair and those signs. That's absolutely part of it. I don't need the explanation of another boy went missing and here's a newscast we happen to be hearing and blah blah blah. The movie's as you just said, it's tight. It's 2.5 hours, but it moves. I watched this at work. I rewatched it at work today because I've seen so much, and I literally was like, "Oh shit, it's already 3:00." Like, I was, illegally watching it, meaning it shouldn't have been, but
doing it at work. Not
I was in
illegally,
the
more like
office too,
immorally.
Immorally,
You're
but
not doing anything against the law.
time thief. I'm gonna have to. No, I'm making some notes. Here, I see a time thief.
But
I'm calling your boss.
Please. But anyway, the boys do after that whole scene. They're like, we need to stitch this kid up. And they go to this pharmacy, but for some reason they're not allowed to buy what they need from the pharmacist, even though it's nothing.
I think they don't have enough money.
They didn't.
They don't have enough
Is that what? Not enough money.
They didn't have enough money.
And then so Bev distracts the creep pharmacist, and they get what they need, and that's where they kind of hook up with Bev. That's where Bev she knows Ben from running into a school. So like while they're getting this is kind of how they like Bev kind of gets brought.
And she knows the boys, but like Bev just wants friends too.
Yeah,
and
like,
she just wants to buy her tampons.
That's right.
Yeah, and they're just like, all right, peace out. We'll see you. And then they go to the rock quarry, which is
they invite her to the quarry, and she shows up and like changes their lives probably.
Yeah, shows up, jumps right in the water, gets into her, jumps right in the water, and the boys don't know what the fuck to do, and they're just
the scene where they're all staring at her while she's laying there.
So
and then when
good.
she looks up, they're
So
all
funny.
like, "Oh, what's
sports?"
No.
Yeah.
That and when they go to her apartment after the blood thing, and she's like, "I have to show you something," and Richie goes, "More than you showed us at the quarry." That's so good.
I find that scene fucking crazy though when they go in the rock water right after stitching up their friend. They're like, "Yeah, the quarry water. Let's just swim all in that."
He's got a little bandage. It's fine.
It's good.
Well, that's a runner was the gray water, so they kept bringing that up too.
Yeah, he's afraid of the gray water.
Mm-hmm.
But where are we from there? And I don't know. I feel like this is when we all meet them and they meet up, and then this is also when we really get our Pennywise to start ramping up.
Well, they've all like had an encounter, and they all start telling each other about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they all go. This is where they all go back to Ben's after this, and he kind of like lays out what he thinks is going on. And that's this scene.
They're in the town fair, and Ben's like, and they look through the newspaper clip. Shows them the newspaper clippings, and And I mean, my favorite scene of the movie is absolutely the projector scene.
It's yeah, that's a. I was gonna say you were talking about the scariest scenes. I think that's probably the one that I think is the most effective in this movie.
And I've seen that scene, mimicked in other things since then in like lazier ways. And it just doesn't work. It's like, I know what you're going to do. Like, the thing going off by itself just to have the monster reveal. Sorry. This is where I say I get lost and all over the place.
Lose your train of thought.
Yeah.
It happens.
That's because you're doing what I'm doing, just picturing giant Pennywise reaching out. And like, ah! I think that's what gets me. Like, I had seen the thing, you talk about it goes off by itself, or the picture, like, weirdly starts to reveal something. I mean, I guess they'd even done it earlier in the movie with the kid in the tree, when Ben was looking. But, like, it's when they kick in and then giant Pennywise is, like, in the garage with them.
Well, I
think that's where, like, they took it to the next level that you weren't expecting,
Before he reveals himself. Like, before that had happened, too, it's, we get Pennywise and learn, like, it's all really great comedic effect. Like, him, of a distance, waving the arm of the boy he just, ate at.
I love waving Georgie's little arm, or whoever's arm it's supposed to be. That's so funny.
And, I mean, even, like, it was in all the trailers of the balloons coming past his face. Like, there's comedic from Skarsgård there, after the creepy thing. And the pinnacle of it is that slideshow machine, because you're right. This isn't just this clown. This guy's fucking giant.
Yeah,
or could be whatever he wants to be.
But I think we didn't talk enough about Skarsgård, but I do think he does a great job of being menacing, even though he sounds ridiculous. Like, he's being silly. Everything about him should seem silly, but he's still somehow menacing, and that's a very delicate line to walk. You know what I mean? I think he does it. It would have been hard.
Well,
he doesn't play. He plays it different than Curry, and you had to. You couldn't just do what Tim Curry was doing, or that would suck. You'd just be out here.
Definitely the smart way to do it. I would say, like, from watching what he's doing for Choices, it's very. I would say, if you're doing that character, it's very authentic to it. Where it's like, this is what is he trying to do in order to appeal to children, to get their guard down. And, like, you see that all in the first scene, going back to it, where he's like, popcorn. But it's and like, also, my like, parents say not to talk to strangers.
Feels alien too. Feels strange. It
feels off.
He knows how to mimic those things, but he doesn't feel natural.
But he still knows the words to say, to be like, oh, we're not strangers anymore. Your name's Georgie, my name's Pennywise. And it's like, it's a different tone. And it's like, how do I get these kids to kind of let their guard down and let me in? Because he's realized, like, if the more comfortable they're feeling, the more I hit them the other direction, they're going to get that more feel. They're going to have more fear. It's going to be better for Pennywise in the long run.
No, you're absolutely right there. Like, it's just this foreboding and building of this character and letting you in, and that's why, I mean, it's a modern horror icon now. Like, the best ones smallly let you in before you, I think, find them iconic. There's a reason why Bagul from fucking Sinister didn't stick around, right?
Yeah. Or like the Insidious demon didn't catch on in its own
And Pennywise's it really stuck around. And what made me realize it is as a couple years ago, when this movie was new, it was like a year or two after new, I was at it was like a family kind of funeral thing. So there was all people I didn't know, and I was in charge of, like, hey Joe, can you just watch all these little kids? And there was one that was like 9, maybe 10. Like, she was younger than Harrison, or about the same age at the time. And I remember her, kids do. She's like, Pennywise is down there, like, teasing the other kids who have no idea who the fuck Pennywise is. And I'm like, oh, this is your Freddy Krueger now. Like, that's the way she talked about it, as if, like, someone of that age teased someone else. And I was just a bystander, like, don't run, making sure. And listen, I always
Joe
stay with
gathered all the kids around and told them that Pennywise was down there.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, don't go down there. Pop, pop, pop. Doing a little impression. Yeah. And
the fact that one lost their arm has nothing to do with anything.
Don't worry about that.
Anyway, I'll never forget that because it was so like, holy shit. Yeah, I remember having that like fear of a movie character. That's
Or
not
even
an
like
urban
talking about a
legend.
movie character that you knew was scary, even though you had never seen the movie. You know, they were just in
Freddy Krueger to me is
cultural
a
zeitgeist, yeah.
cultural
6-year-old.
zeitgeist, exactly.
So a little bit after that, you know, they're or is it before that? Anyway, they go to Bev deals with the pool of blood and the fucking hair wrap in the sink, and you know, they all have their moments, and that's the biggest one. Being Bill sees Georgie in the basement, and that's fucking terrifying. I think that is also him at a scary, like in the water, just eyes peering back.
When you realize that he's legitimately like puppeting Georgie, that's very creepy, you know.
Yeah, and that's something that goes unnoticed too, I think, in like a first watch always of like he's just using the dead body and throwing the voice as a ventriloquist more than anything.
Yeah.
And so like all this stuff happens. I mean,
well, they decide they're going to go to the house because that's what his mom, like that's the confluence of all those sewers. Like that's where
the
they can
well
get
is,
to the big. That's where
yeah,
they
and
can
it's this
get into an
haunted
area
house.
that they've decided they need to search or whatever.
It's where Eddie saw the leper come from.
Yeah.
And everyone is like, Bill, what the fuck are you doing? And
Fair.
he's like, and he does, and I love that Eddie points out, Richie points out, wow, you didn't stutter. He gives this big fucking speech about how I have to go do something. And that haunted house scene is just, it's an act of like filmmaking brilliance too, because it's truly, it becomes a fun house, but
almost everybody gets a scene in there. Like it's a moment in the house to have something cool or have a cool set piece or something.
Well, and there's two separate times because at first they go in there and there's only three of them, and then they realize that they can't just be the three of them because then they easily get separated, they easily get overpowered, and then that's when you had the first when they actually do defeat him for the first time, and then they leave, and then you have the fight between all of them, and then they disband, and then Bev gets kidnapped. So
the first time is the point where though like they go in, you have the clown full of the rooms, and that's a really fun, you know, if you could pause it and you could see the first It clown in the background.
Yeah, the Tim Curry,
and it's a really good nod.
Yeah,
but
Richie freaking out over his own missing posters is a good one because Richie hadn't had a big Pennywise moment like everybody else, so he was
just afraid of clowns.
The skeptical one, yeah.
And you know, and then the big one is they get upstairs, and then it's, you know, choose your own fate, basically. Scary, not scary, really fucking
very scary. Yeah.
And you know, I think that all doors are going to be bad, but they go through it and they deal with their fate, and that's right. They get out of it, but they, as you said, they argue on that front fucking lawn of like, we're not in this, we're in this because of you, and we're out of here.
And
I was going to say my favorite scare there is when he comes out of the fridge, the way he like unfolds out of the fridge. He kind of like untwists. They just did that again. Sam Raimi did that with the Scarlet Witch in the new Doctor Strange movie.
Yes.
They have her do that same move.
You're right.
It's very good though. It's very cool.
It's a good effect.
It's better in it. It looks better in it.
Oh, sure.
It's also supposed to be like they tone it. I feel like with
because it's more supernaturally, and you know what I mean. Because like everything's so fantastical but I think it's really creepy the way he unfolds out of there, and then that's when.
Well, it's you learn quick.
He's got a really terrible fake broken arm in that scene. Like you can totally see his real arm. Like it's not, if you know it, once you notice it, it's hard not to see.
Oh, I gotta pay attention to that next time.
I don't remember when I picked up on it, but now when I watch that scene, it's like a really great scene. It's because it's got that moment of intensity between Bill that you were talking. I think it's the scene you're talking about where they were filming and he first like scares Eddie and like. It's got all that in it, but then when you notice that bad fake arm, I'm like, don't worry about that. Just pay attention to the performance.
I mean, it could have been there. It would have made a lot of sense.
Yeah, but then when we, it's definitely there if you noticed it, but it didn't. So I'm surprised they weren't like, let's smooth it out. You know, the CGI
It
for
doesn't,
that's
like I
not a
said,
lot.
I don't even think it's that noticeable, but once you notice it, and now I've ruined it for everybody who watches this podcast. So.
Right. I will say the only time I noticed something where it was like overly CGI, and we talked about a little bit earlier, was when they're doing that rock war. When the kids are throwing, it was some real janky looking green.
Yeah, it was Forrest Gump.
Yeah, there's some weird.
I was like
green.
ooh.
There's some weird green screen in that scene. That's
like the bullies looked okay.
Place.
The bullies looked fine, but with the kids on the other side, like it just. And I think that's why the cuts were so quick. I was like, that's strange. This is a little.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
Forrest
about.
Gump Ping Pong, which is over a decade before this comes out, and you're like, that looks great because it's
almost
1994.
two decades.
Two decades before.
Yeah, 20 years. Yeah.
That's a good eye there, but
that's so many skeets. I don't even know how many skeets that is.
That's not
like 40 skeets.
That's a lot of skeets. So
it sounds dirtier than it is.
That's right. Somebody's listening to this section just that out. You're not going to know what we're talking about. And you know what? I don't want to explain it. I like it like this.
No.
At the midpoint of the movie, though, where they do split up, and it truly is this midpoint of the movie, and we get a hard stop, and we go back to our racist piece of shit bully, but at this point we learn, he's getting abused by his father. They're playing with his gun, and Pennywise has plans for him because Pennywise has eyes on the whole fucking town. And will that come
Pennywise in the TV when he's watching the TV?
It's my favorite. It's Terrifier 2 just not stole that, but they did the same fucking thing. And there's a TV bit of a kid's show and talking, and supposed to be the reality of it. And kill your dad, kill him, kill them all. Mm-hmm. And he mails, basically, to my knowledge, Pennywise mails him a switchblade that pops right out. And at that point, that character is just possessed.
Yeah.
He's doing his bidding, and like you said, we see Bev get kidnapped in a little bit. Right before that, Richie has a really bad fucking encounter in the pharmacy where the placebo. He learns the placebo. Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
Learns the placebos. This girl bullily hits on him, but she doesn't. She just writes "loser" on his arm that he changed to "lover." and it was spelled like "lover" though, like a bad movie though. The big
yeah.
Everyone's world's kind of breaking down here, and.
Yeah,
but
and like I said, you learn more about it in the second part. This is our lowest point, though. This is our everybody's down moment.
Yeah,
so they all split up.
Bev literally, she literally hits her father with the sink. She beats the shit out of her father.
The back of the toilet.
It was the back of the toilet.
Toilet tank lid.
Yeah,
a classic movie weapon. Very nice, heavy porcelain.
Yeah,
brain something with that.
He goes down. He doesn't die though. I don't.
I think that would probably kill somebody.
Yeah, I don't think he dies, but it is enough that she gets to move away.
Yeah, she goes
sends her away or whatever.
And that I mean, if really boiled down, that's the creepiest reality scene of the movie. You're still my little girl.
The motif of that is just it's so gross. I will say gross, but also good. It's so well done to make everybody feel that uncomfortable. You're just like, oh, this is. I don't even like watching this.
It's a.
And without having to overdo it, also you don't need to see him actually assaulting her. You can just leave it.
Got it. I got it from the first.
It's so heavily implied.
Yeah.
Let's go back. It's like it should have been alluded in Forrest Gump. Mentioned a lot of Forrest Gump mentioned in this podcast. Jenny had the same life, but Forrest said it in a way where
that's what I pitched Joe. I'm like, you know what? I want to talk about it, but I really want to talk about Forrest Gump and the parallels. So
I thought you were talking about when Jenny assaults Forrest in her dorm room.
That's shut. We get
Let's not get into it.
Yeah. I'm going to skip right over that. But right after that, though, I did make a note. Speaking of that, they clearly had their Nightmare on Elm Street influence because it's Nightmare 5 Dream Child is playing in the theaters and had to be done on purpose.
Yeah, definitely.
I didn't go the extra step and look to see if it actually was out during the summer of 89.
I want to say, I want to say somebody did the research in that. I think it tracks.
It probably does.
I think it tracks okay. I can't remember for sure, but I feel like it's good enough, and it's a good reference. Honestly, you could get away with it, even if it's a little late in the season. That could be like the cheap seat theater where it's late run, you know.
I'm not
something.
too worried about. I wasn't too worried about it.
It's really going to like change your enjoyment
Yeah,
of this movie one way or the other.
That continuity error was going to fuck up my whole experience.
You ever hear those people like that were like getting mad at like Star Wars for not using like certain type of screws?
I was going to say we stopped recording. There's just this big long Twitter thread from
Yeah,
Joe
it's
about
like,
how it's ruined just because
get a fucking life.
Doesn't line up.
But right then we do get the Pennywise kidnaps Bev after the scene of she kicks the shit out of her dad. Like at least Pennywise, nice enough, he gives her that win, but then he takes her.
He takes her, he lets her get that one in.
And
that's kind of what brings everybody back together.
Yeah,
Bev gets kidnapped.
They're like, he has Bev. And they go back to the house. Like, we'll get to the store. They have a plan, and then they literally just go in the well one by one. Mike's about to go down, but all of a sudden the fucking bully comes back, and they have a tussle.
And somehow he survives this.
Yeah, right. He
survives
falls,
a fall down the well.
And gets out of the tunnels with like all injured and shit.
You're talking about a 30-foot drop easily. Like it's surprising. I mean, good for Mike.
He bounces off the inside of the well a little bit too. It looks pretty grim. It's pretty gruesome.
No, Mike's good. Yeah, Mike's good. The bully.
Okay. It's the bully.
That's the bully who just plummets.
Because he's in the sequel.
Oh yeah, he escapes from prison and Pennywise possesses him again. Basically, like
he's in like a minimum security, like almost like a mental health facility. It seems like he's not like in prison.
So, but then we get the well, and that actually like. This is where I do feel like the movie maybe should have like this scene is important, but like it goes on for 25 minutes, like down in
the whole sewer sequence,
the whole sewer sequence. But it's all just dealing separate motifs with Pennywise. I mean, they have to go through their own trials and tribulations down in that sewer system. Even just get to Bev, and Bev even stands up and she's like, "I'm not afraid of you," and he then just straight up opens his gator mouth and possesses her, and she floats up.
Those are the deadlights.
And one of my favorite,
but he doesn't eat her because she's not afraid.
No,
he paralyzes her and puts her away. He's like, "I'll come back to you," but she's not afraid, so he's not. That's how she survives.
Correct.
And one of my pulled at this note earlier is when she hits him earlier, or someone does. What I really love about it, he's always. I don't know if anyone noticed it. He's always down. So if he gets hit, his blood floats up.
Yeah.
It's just such a nice feature that, like,
that makes it feel just otherworldly. It's
it's always right. Sore.
It floats.
It reminds me of like in. I know we're all big Prometheus heads here.
Yeah, I don't know if you know that. We're all big pro heads.
Have you ever watched that when they find the little caskets? The same thing. The goo like flows up.
It just goes up a little bit. There's a little bit of vibration on it.
It just gives you that unnatural, unnerving. Like that's just not right. There's something very not right about that.
It's such a because everything in that store goes up.
Mm-hmm.
They all float.
I think in that same time frame, in that same sequence, I like what they do, and I know how it's done now. I don't know if this is how it would have been done 6-7 years ago when this is shot, but when they have those shots where he's like doing those creepy dances and his head is the only thing that doesn't move, but his whole body and whole frame moves around him.
Yeah.
I've seen that before now, and they did it a little bit if you remember Upgrade, they did this in Upgrade where like
Sure.
basically they had
The camera's like fixed with him.
the camera was rigged to a mount, and basically I think it was a GPS, or there was something that was like a gyroscope or something was on the actor, and so when he moved, the camera moved with him. So I don't know if this was like an early instance, because they could have attached it like to the back of his head, and that would have made it be able to be filmed practically.
Yeah.
But like it looks so unnatural and it looks so creepy, and they do it like a handful of times. I want to say they do it 3 or 4 times, and like each time they do it, it's like, yeah, that's kind of terrifying. Where it's like, imagine like my head not moving, but the rest of everything behind me is like somehow, again, like we said, otherworldly, like moving in a very unnatural way.
Yeah, he does a jig, real like
the dancing jig. Yeah.
And do you guys remember?
Dancing clown.
Do you remember when this sword also really makes me giggle? I mean, it's a terrifying scene, but it makes me giggle. Do you remember the promo, like the first like EW or something like that, like Vanity Fair or something, photos they released of this?
Yeah.
And like it shouldn't have been released, because there's
It was
this
a
big
terrible
sore.
Photoshop.
It's this big sore, and then there's just a little tiny Pennywise head popping out of
Like
the
his little head
sword.
and shoulders all at a weird angle,
And-
like
and
popped
it-
out. Whoop.
Like it looked like on the surface, like there's probably tweets of me or like bad there was photoshops already. Like this is gonna be bad.
Yeah, I
Like-
remember it did not. It's one of those things like this. They should not release this image. Like,
It was comical. But while we're down there, they like so there's a lot of dancing, and Pennywise is just ramping up his assault on the kids.
Mhm.
With fear tactics and everything, and the one thing they do, but they find Bev. They do find Bev and they rescue her, but doing so, he takes Bill and basically goes, "I'll let you guys go if you just give me Bill."
well, I was gonna say, I think first you have to acknowledge that Bill has this kind of confrontation with Georgie, and like kind of
Yeah.
like overcomes his guilt of what happened to Georgie, and that takes away. I mean, he actually hits Pennywise with the cow. The cat.
Yeah,
Sure,
he
yeah.
kills, literally kills Georgie.
Literally kills Georgie, and then that's when Georgie comes up and he's Pennywise, and he grabs him, and he's got
Why'd you
Bill,
do
and he's
that?
like, "I'll let everybody go. You leave Bill." And Bill's like, "Leave me here, because
Mhm.
I'm a martyr. I got you all into this."
Yeah.
And
And then
I already
Richie
still
stands
lost
up.
my
Yeah.
brother. And
Yeah.
everything.
And that's where Richie really comes in and just, does a 180 where he's like, because they had that fight earlier and they never
Yeah.
resolved that fight. And he's like, all right.
The way he slow rolls that though, where he's like
He does a
starts
really good
off
job.
mad at Bill, it's a good turn. It's got that real Lando and Han energy, where it's like, you don't know, are they gonna fight? Are they gonna hug? What's gonna happen?
Yep.
And then they all go, and then they just turn and go to fucking town on Pennywise.
Yeah.
Which is actually a better ending than the second movie.
I agree.
Or where they
Yeah.
just shout
They
obscenities
bully
at
him.
him.
They literally bully
They
him.
bully him
And he
until
turns into a small
he's a
baby.
little deflated balloon man.
Oh, it.
I was like,
What
when
happened?
I watched the ending of that one, I know we're not talking about part 2, and I know I said I'm a defender, but when I was watching it, so I'm watching part 2, and I'm
Yeah,
watching
bro.
the ending, and I'm like, okay, I think they did the spider monster right, like the best they could. This is pretty good.
Mhm.
And then that ending, I was like, oh, you still managed to fuck it up.
I will say, this is fun fact. When I saw this in theaters when we were doing reviews for Ramble On, I did a double feature of this, and you guys will never guess the other one, because it was also touted as a horror movie, and it very much wasn't a horror movie.
Mother.
Yes,
2007.
yes,
Wait, really?
nailed it.
Mother.
Yeah,
It was
It's-
it was your description.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed it.
Horror.
You said I would never guess. I only guessed it because
that was the most mismarked. Like, I watched the movie and I'm like, what is this?
oh,
And I'm like,
Mother
it's,
is a
it's not a horror movie.
Mother is a movie that should not. It had Jennifer Lawrence in it, and was it Harvey Bardem? But
Yep.
it should not have
Ed
been a
Harris
movie.
and Michelle Pfeiffer, and I think that
Yeah,
was
its
it for big
cast
names.
is really good, but
Yeah.
it shouldn't have been a movie to mass audiences, and
No.
that's the problem.
It's-
So it was like,
It should have been like a little art house indie, and they tried to
Yeah.
market it like an A24 kind
And
of
then,
thing.
like,
And
try to be like, oh, that was
I actually
have
kind of like Mother.
couple
I
good,
was- I think if I rewatched it now, I would like it more. But after I got out of it, I'm like,
I didn't
feel
see
like-
it till after all the hype, but if I'd have seen it at the height of its like hype. I know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? I think I could have.
As
That's a
soon as-
weird double feature.
Yeah, it was a super weird double feature, especially because I'm trying to think which I saw first. I think I saw it first because I remember going into Mother and I was like a minute or two late, and so like things were already going. Also, not to mention Mother, like 3/4 of that movie is just waist up on Jennifer Lawrence. Like that's most of what the movie is, and I'm like, okay, like it's for what I was describing for Mother. I'm like, this is a movie that's going to be great for many, many film classes, but as far as like a mass appeal audience, it's
Absolutely.
I don't know how you market that movie.
You had a fucking the artsiest movie you could have done, and the popcorn horror.
Yeah, like it was jarring. I did another one. I think I did another double feature, and I'm pretty sure it was Pop Star and Swiss Army Man. Or
I actually like that as a double feature. That's one of my favorite comedies.
That might have, or it might have been. No, it was Pop Star and the Lobster. It was even weirder than that.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's weirder because I could see Swiss Army Man and it has some humor in it. You know. Yeah. Back to it though.
Sure.
So no, that's good insight. So they defeat Pennywise, right? Like, and I don't know, please let me know if I've skipped anything here.
No, I think
we jumped around. It's fine.
And he seizes out when he dies too.
And part of his head flows away.
And his head floats away, one of my favorite things too is like we get this visualization of these kids that have died in this round are at rest.
Mm-hmm.
They come down from floating and being in the air, and their souls could assumably rest like Georgie's, and that's that.
Although you do get a pretty grim scene in part 2 of all their corpses flushing out into the sewer, which is pretty gross. It's a bunch of kid parts.
In your cereal. And then we go back to like they're back in this cliff and they're just reminiscing, and now this thing is just this like feeling and this distant memory, like they're all not quite sure what they went through yet, and Bev's just describing of like it's a feeling. That's all I feel, and we can, But if this thing comes back again, they make their blood oath. We will
pledge of their blood oath.
We will be here to fight it back, and that's Mike, who we do learn. The second one he's the only one who never leaves dairy, and Bev and Bill share a nice kiss. And we learn Bev is going to go live with her aunt, so there's some resolution. There's positive evolution of the thing that was the most evil that was out of anyone's control.
Mm-hmm.
Then the movie, then that's it. Anything really missed in this? I know, like, there was some character stuff with, like, Ben has a big crush on Bev, and, there's that whole love story and love triangle or something.
Well, it does.
Burns there, too.
It pays off. It's more of a love triangle in the sequel, if I remember correctly.
Oh, it pays off.
Well, I mean, I think it's set up as a love triangle, but I think in the second movie, and I know in the second part, Bill is married and stuff.
Yeah.
He has a wife, but like kind of what happens in Derry stays in Derry. You definitely get the impression that he'd have been down if she was down, but then Ben shows up looking like I don't know, the dude that got cast to play Ben is like a very handsome gentleman.
It was and that was the other thing.
He definitely blew old John Ritter out of the water. No offense, but
that was John Ritter's character.
Yeah.
Well, and we talked briefly about that's very even art imitating life, or vice versa. That's very Stand By Me and Jerry O'Connell, who was the chubby kid in the initial
glow up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's like Google the man who played, or the kid who played the lead of Heavyweights. Who wasn't even that big of a kid in Heavyweights, even though he's leading the Heavyweights. The guy is, I think he's just a, your working actor these days, but like, grew up a bit, very like stereotypically handsome.
I was going to say, or even I follow him on Instagram, Jonathan Lipnicki, the kid who was in Jerry Maguire.
He's like creepily jacked.
Yeah, he's like a fitness dude now.
He's an MMA fighter, I think.
Yeah, is he an MMA fighter now? I think last time Jonathan Lipnicki popped up on my radar was back of the Screen Junkies day when they tried to do their shitty TV show.
Oh yeah,
he was an actor on it. I forget what it's called. Agents of Field.
Yep, yeah, I remember that too. there was and the other one last night because we're taping this right after the Oscars when Ke Huy Quan was thanking he thanked his other Goonies friend because he became an entertainment
Jeff Cohen, yeah.
Jeff Cohen, yep.
Oh, that was the one he thanked, Jeff Cohen? Okay,
Yeah,
I wasn't sure what...
He's an entertainment
agent,
lawyer.
yeah.
His entertainment lawyer.
Yeah, he was like quote unquote his agent when no one wanted to represent him, and he was one of the few people who's like been in his life since then.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Everything with Ke Huy Quan is super heartwarming. Like,
it's
everything you hear about him,
every time he opens his mouth,
every time he tweets.
I just warm fuzzies, yeah.
Fuzzies. All right, we're ending this one on a fuzzy. Dan,
thank God Data wasn't there. I couldn't have handled if Pennywise killed Data.
Right.
Derry can't
tie it in, tie it together.
I like that idea. Let's just do a series of movies like Pennywise versus famous groups of movie kids. So you do Pennywise versus the Goonies, Pennywise versus Stand By Me, Pennywise versus the Monster Squad,
Pennywise versus the kids from Heavyweights,
or E.T. Yeah,
Mighty Ducks, and then Mighty Ducks.
Oh, but Mighty Ducks for Mighty Ducks 2 because I want those trick players. I want the cowboy and I want the cat. Julie the cat.
Keenan would do that. Yeah, let's get Keenan.
Daphne.
Yeah. Keenan rocking a knuckle puck at Pennywise's face.
Yeah, Keenan's knuckle puck. Can you imagine him eating a knuckle puck right to the skull? I love it.
After Fulton just blasted
it. Damn, this is such a good idea. Like, honestly, Disney Plus should just do
You're welcome, Hollywood.
Right? Like, this free money. You're printing money off of this thing.
Oh, man. All right. But anything you do want to add to just this discussion or...
Well, I didn't talk just a little bit. The one thing I think in the movie that I did that I was most proud of, like in one of the first couple of days we shot, because just you shoot movies out of order, so we shot the ending first. We shot at this really creepy, like, because a lot of people I worked with were involved, like in the Midwest, as you guys know. There's a lot of haunted houses, and they're fucking everywhere. But one of the ones that they used at a haunted houses was like a haunted old jail. So it was like there's paint everywhere. It was really gnarly. But I was able to in the movie, and Joe, you have to tell me if and when you ever watch it. I will
watch it.
In the climax of the movie, I'm able to throw in a Back to the Future reference, which I was very, 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 very proud of. Cool. Because I don't remember what the scripted line was, and I just improv this one, and they say, "Okay, do it again," and I did it again, and they're like, "Great, moving on," and I'm like. Yeah. You were keeping that? Sweet. So
no script supervisor there for you to.
There really wasn't. So we added and subtracted as we saw fit, and it was a lot of fun.
That's great. I'll check it out. I selfishly just have been only watching One Tree Hill for 4 weeks,
I mean, my wife would be very proud of that, and that, like, because we're not.
Aren't you worried your horror fandom is going to come down on you for your One Tree Hill?
No, I mention it in every podcast I've recorded in the last 3 days, and I'll say this because when I was watching Final Destination 4, I was of that time, and I go, I bet you one of these fucking kids was on One Tree Hill. And what did you know? The lead girl is in a full season arc. Of the so it all comes back.
My money was on the dude who gets his butthole sucked out, but
not. Yeah,
you're only a couple of episodes or a few months away from just fully going Flyover state of Tree Hill, and there's going to be another spinoff.
Don't tempt me with a good time. No,
rewatch show.
But
but that's the market on One Tree Hill podcast.
But that's what you get. With this podcast is I'll relate it to anything that's going on in my life with the horror movie. But yeah, that I'll definitely check out your movie though. Like I said, you usually get together with some friends on a bi-weekly basis to watch kind of that level of movie.
That'll be fun. It's schlocky fun. It's a killer clown horror movie, but if you watch it, it plays more like a buddy cop comedy.
Love it. Great. So, that was it. Part 1. Maybe we'll be back to talk part 2, just to give a full it out rounded. If Dan, you'd like to be back, more than welcome to. So Dan, I already asked if you have anything to add. Where can everyone find you today? And every of this will be below.
I'm on various social medias, more or less all of them. I have a TikTok that I don't use, but Instagram, Twitter at hi Dan Nye. It's all one word, OHHI, Dan Nye. And then you can find me at Communities doing admin stuff for their Twitter, and then for the podcast, the community podcast at Apartment 303. So yeah, a bunch of other stuff. I have other things going on as well, so we'll see if and when anything else comes out to light of day, because we're there's always things talking that I'm involved in. It's just a matter of whether or not they get executed or whether or not they come out. So
various states of production.
Exactly. Like it's always a weird thing. Like nothing like too cool that's in the works yet, but I'm always open for that and like available for those kinds of things. But it's also just I love talking movies and shows and whatnot. Like kind of like you were saying, you'll relate everything back to One Tree Hill. I'll do that for Community. I was taking notes
right now. I'll
shows.
do that in another month. There's a new show that'll bump it.
He'll be on to something else then.
But I know what you're saying.
Mine's been Community for years, so that's why I can confidently say with that.
No, mine's just whatever in my life is going on. That's what I'm going to relate it to. Brian's talking to me for 5 years. That's how it goes. You can find us at Flyover State of Film and Flyover State of Fear Network on YouTube and the podcast channels, and we're just on Twitter. Anything you got going on, Brian?
No, on Twitter at Hershkiles, and here doing. I'm on Joe's show now. I'm fucking staking my claim as the Andy Richter of this show. And I'm going to show up here to make sure there's not too many handsome dudes with sultry voices on here. You need a big fat guy with a beard with a raspy voice. That's a podcast rule. You gotta have.
I like how you say that immediately after he invited me on to do another episode.
Yeah, and
that's what I'm saying.
That's a wrap, guys.
That's the last one.
Stay frightful, everyone. Bye.
Welcome to Flyover State of Fear.